Hi, I am Katina Horton, the Love and Freedom Toxic Relationship Recovery Coach. And today's Bible teaching is dealing with and recovering from the DARVO method part 2. And before I get into the Bible teaching, I just want to remind you that we always wear a tie so that we can make an impact. That means we're analyzing, troubleshooting, implementing, empowering, and impacting the women in our homes, communities, and where else around the world. The quickest and easiest way for you to do that is to hit the like button and to please share this message with someone else that you know will consider it of value to them. And so, without further ado, I want to get straight on into the Bible teaching, right? I do believe that God has a blessing in store for us in this message. So, DARVO, as we talked about yesterday, it's manipulation, it's gaslighting, and it's exploitation of your trauma, vulnerabilities, brokenness, and proclivities. And when we get to the point of gaslighting someone, we've decided that having power and control through manipulation and deception is more important than accepting responsibility for our actions. And I want you to really sit in that for a while, right? I want you to really think about that. When we choose to use DARVO instead of pressing into the pain, DARVO becomes our default operating system for every part of communication that we have with other people. DARVO means you're saying, I value and love darkness over light. And remember, the word knowledge means light, right? And so, people of integrity, when we're people of integrity, we accept responsibility. When we are people of toxic jealousy, of envy, deception, confusion, and malice, then what do? We accept gaslighting. But there's no other way to look at it. Gaslighting is gaslighting, right? There's no way to dress it up. The moment that we minimize gaslighting is the moment that we maximize self-abuse, self-gaslighting, self-abandonment, and self-loathing, right? And so yesterday I gave two different examples of DARVO. And remember, DARVO means denial, right? Attack, reverse, victim, and offender, right? I gave two examples yesterday. And so with option number 2, when we're looking at that option that I gave, when I gave that example, the question you might have in your head about option number 2 might be, why did John admit his wrongdoing and then go right back to attacking you in the process instead of expounding on what led him to that place? That might be your question. Why would John do that, right? Why in the world would John do that? And the answer to that question is in my coaching methodology, freedomology, right? And there's a term that I have in that methodology. It's the last part of the 5L relational cycle, and it's entitled Limited World View, right? And so limited worldview consists of our wiring, our personality, unresolved trauma, false concepts about love, lies, limiting beliefs, right? Learned stress responses. And we know the 4 stress responses is what? Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And fawn is also known as please, appease. When you're flighting, you are just literally piecing out. Every time there's an argument, you are running somewhere, right? You're escaping somewhere. You're physically leaving where you are. Another way of flighting is going into escapism, right? And that means you're going on the hamster wheel to numb out from the pain, right? You're trying to find anything that's going to be a what? Pain reliever, right? And then what happens though, no matter which one of the 4 trauma responses come up, trauma in general distorts our view of God. It distorts our view of ourselves. It distorts our view of others, right? And so the other things that's composed in this limited worldview, because so far we've gone over wiring, we've gone over personality, we've gone over unresolved trauma. Limited worldview also consists of, like I said, the false concepts about love, lies, limiting beliefs, the 4 learned stress responses, right? It also consists of our norms, values, and standards. And standards is basically what it is that you will and will not tolerate for your operating system, right? Of how you're going to do things in life. It's basically your principles, right? And then we have the other part of the limited worldview is toxic thinking, which means that you have reckless death words and thinking patterns day in, day out, right? Another part of that limited worldview is coping mechanisms, right? That could be cutting, picking parts of your body, going on that lax cycle of addiction where you're on that hamster wheel, right? Of love, approval, comfort, and knowledge addictions, right? Once again, you're trying to find a pain reliever, right? And then the other thing that's a part of the limited worldview is your conflict resolution styles, which is basically how do you handle conflict? How do you handle the drama when it comes up, right? Do you just try to peace out, or do you sit there and try to resolve it? Do you try to sweep everything under the rug? And so that can go anywhere from what? Repression, suppression, regression, etc., right? Another part of the limited worldview. And I know you're saying this is a lot, and it is a lot that's involved in this limited worldview, right? That we may have. It's scarcity mindset. So with this scarcity mindset, you want to start hoarding everything because you think there's not going to be enough, right? But then when you start hoarding and hoarding, think about a grocery store. The next thing you know, they're having a crisis situation because what? One individual has hoarded what usually one individual might get 5 of. Now they've gotten 100 to 200 of. And so there's not enough left for everybody else, right? So you tried to do that because of scarcity mindset. It's enough, but they've got to order, right? Because you've consumed more in the store in the temporary status than you should have, right? So scarcity mindset can make us start hoarding things, right? Instead of getting what it is we need, right? And then scarcity mindset also can prevent you from even going through with your calling. You thinking, okay, well, with this scarcity mindset, you can start to go, well, you know what? There's 20 people out there and they're talking about depression. There's 20 authors that have written books on depression. So if I go and write books on depression, then that's going to do something with my calling. Who says? But you've got that in your mindset. That's what scarcity mindset does. Having an abundance mindset means what? There is more than enough, right? And so what happens is that along with this scarcity mindset, you start thinking the only way for you to win is that you've got to beat somebody else and bring somebody else down, that everything in life is a competition, right? Comparison and competition. Those type of things all involve that scarcity mindset. Then another thing that's part of the limited worldview is false doctrine. That means you've been taught not to believe in the word of God, but to believe in the words that other people say as if it's scripture, right? And that what happens, it reminds me of when Jesus told the Pharisees, told the disciples that the Pharisees are taking all these heavy weights and putting on people's shoulders, and they themselves are not even carrying the weights, but they like, here, there's just like somebody giving us 3 or 4 backpacks full of bricks, but they're not carrying anything up the mountain, but they want us to carry those loads up the mountain, right? And so that's what happens when it comes to false doctrine. It's just dead weight. It's heavy weight, right? Heavy weight. It's real simple and easy as far as the plan of salvation is concerned, but we take it and we want to make it impossible for people, right? What else is part of a limited worldview? The other part of the limited worldview is when what? When we say things like, oh, we don't see color, when we make that a doctrine, right? And then what we do is that we create confirmation biases about people, places, things, or ideas. All of the above that I mentioned is limited worldview, right? According to the coaching methodology, freedomology that I created, all of those different things is a limited worldview, right? And so confirmation bias happens when we use our limited worldview that we've attained from our family's love story garden, and then we develop statements that reinforce the limited worldview as well as the confirmation bias itself, right? And so because of the unresolved trauma and our inability to see God for who he really is, these statements set up a bias towards certain people, places, things, and ideas that's different than ours. So we develop this critical, judgmental, condemning behavior and attitude, right? This whole countenance toward people, places, things, and ideas that's different from the ones that we have, right? And what that causes us to have a prideful, arrogant spirit, an arrogant heart, right? And these statements become so deep-seated that all of the unresolved trauma causes us to, like a portal of this trauma, to connect to what? Familiar spirits through this portal of trauma, right? And then it does what? Does nothing but distort our view of God, once again, distort our view of ourselves. Then it distorts our view of others, right? And so instead of us repelling the groups of people, places, things, and ideas that we have biases against, we actually become a magnet towards them, right? We have come up with this whole list of things, people, places, things, and ideas that we don't like, and say, I'm never doing that. It's all we know. If we haven't resolved the trauma, if we haven't gone through the steps to do the healing, and that's all we know, we're just going to go right back to those familiar spirits. So the very things that we've set up all of these belief systems on are the very things we're going to be attracted to. It's like a battery. You think about it, and I've mentioned this before, when you have a AA battery, they've got a plus and a minus side. We attract ourselves to the people who have opposite charges of those same familiar spirits: abandonment, rejection, loneliness, right? All of those, low self-esteem, low self-worth, right? False concepts about love. We attract ourselves to the same type of people, right? And then what happens is that when we don't become challenged in what it is we've been taught, whether it's by our parents or grandparents, great-grandparents, and further down, ancestors down the road, we don't grow, because we have to change in order to grow. And in order for us to change, we've got to have something that challenges those beliefs, right? And so otherwise, what happens is that we end up having closed-mindedness. And the closed-mindedness leads to what? Closed hearts. And then the closed hearts lead to what? Closed souls. And then the closed souls lead to what? Closed spirits. It's this domino effect, right? And what we would rather is have that sin of certainty that we are idolizing, right? Over sitting back and thinking, becoming curious. We decide to put a big old X, a big red X on curiosity. It makes me think about Family Feud when they're waiting to see if that was the right answer that's going to come up on the board. And then you get this big old X, right? And so we put a big old red X on curiosity instead of saying, I wonder why this individual thinks this way. Is it possible that could be right? And praying and asking the Holy Spirit to reveal what's true to us, right? What we do oftentimes, we have a belief system. Then we go pick 2 or 3 scriptures, take them out of context to attach it to our belief system, right? And then we put a big red X on curiosity. And then what? We close our minds. We become closed-minded individuals, right? And I want to give you some examples of confirmation bias statements. All men are dogs. All women are catty. All women are messy. All women are gold diggers. All doctors are deceptive. All lawyers are committing fraud. All of blank is lazy. And that blank stands for whatever race you put in there. All blank is needy. Again, a race, right? All museums present fraudulent information. The list just goes on and on and on. And this is about what? People, places, things, and ideas that we have created confirmation bias statements over. And then what happens is, with this confirmation bias statements, they become sealed in the course of our minds, right? Without us even thinking about it. Right? And so don't forget, when it comes to that limited worldview that we just talked about before the confirmation bias, the limited worldview has been obtained from our family's love story garden. Then we added on to it in our relationships with our friends growing up. Then we added on to it in our neighborhoods. Then we added on to it from our church. Then we added on to it what? Group memberships. Then we added on to it from ministry. Then we added on to it for what? Business partners. Workplaces. The list goes on and on and on. And what I call a limited worldview, the scripture actually refers to as a stronghold. Strongholds were physical structures and fortresses that were built to keep the enemies out. And in 2 Corinthians 10, 4-5, it says what? The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. When we create strongholds in our minds based upon our confirmation biases, we think we're keeping the enemies out. We thinking we're keeping all those person, places, things, and ideas that we've said, all this is that, right? But what we're doing is attracting the very things that we think we're keeping out. because that's all we know. We have not gone and literally chiseled down that belief system, right? We have not chiseled down into all those areas I told you that creates that limited worldview, right? And so what happens is when we think we're keeping the enemies out, we're actually attracting them like a magnet. And then at the same time, the stronghold is causing us to reject truth and the knowledge of God. At the same time, this is known as self-sabotage. So why would Satan want us to be healthy? Why would he want for you to remove your stronghold? He doesn't. Satan is the father of lies. He wants to keep you in the dark, right? He wants to catch you lacking, as my children would say, right? Hosea 4:6 says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. That thou shalt be no priest to me, seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. When we don't know something, either through being misinformed or uninformed, we lose out. We could be as wrong as day, and because of that limited worldview, right, / stronghold, which is what scripture calls it, that we built up in our minds, we're not even able to receive the truth if we wanted to. Just like autocorrect in Microsoft Word, the truth goes to the auto reject status without us even knowing it. And so that was the problem with John in that example for option number 2, that example of DARVO I gave yesterday, right? It could be 3-second come to Jesus moment that a person has when you're talking to them, you're communicating with them, or it can be a 3-minute come to Jesus moment. And then that come to Jesus moment is gone. That stronghold has set in. Every limiting belief, toxic thinking pattern, scarcity mindset, confirmation bias, lies, all of it from your family's love story garden and everywhere else you picked it up from, right? Every church, friend, family member, workplace, business, ministry, etc. You picked it up from challenges the truth when it comes in, challenges that come to Jesus moment, right? And then that auto reject status comes up and you reject knowledge and you sabotage yourself. We sabotage ourselves every single time. And so the individual will go right back into attacking you after that's been challenged and his brain goes auto reject. Your narcissistic partner is just going to go right back into attacking you. And any other person who challenges what it is they believe about this specific person, place, thing, or idea, right? The second reason that John went back into attacking you and attack you in general is because you got to remember, each and every one of us have unresolved trauma, right? And so if we have unresolved trauma, we may have unresolved trauma, I guess I would say. I didn't mean to say we all have it. We all may have unresolved trauma, right? And so that becomes part of your limited worldview, right? So remember, when it comes to a narcissistic person, shame is at the core of their entire being. And they will do anything, and I mean anything, to avoid feeling the shame, right? Remember, you serve as a narcissistic individual's poison container, punching bag, emotional regulator, dumping grounds for all of their emotions and trauma in general. They have been operating from a false sense of self for so long, they don't even know who they really are. Their false sense of self has created a false image. And thus, anything and anyone they may possibly go up and destroy, this false image is going to be a target for their rage and vindication, right? And because they're operating from a false sense of self, they give out false love, false abundance, false promises, false hope. And we know in scripture it says, hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. And thus they stay in identity crisis at all times, stealing the identities of different individuals that they interact with, right? Consuming bits and pieces of you and every other person, right? To make it become part of themselves. That's the goal, right? And then when you got that reverse victim and offender, they flip the script on who the victim is or who the offender is. See, she hurt me. She's crazy. Same thing with the reverse discard. They keep sabotaging the situation until you put them out so they can escape responsibility, accountability, and protect that false image they've created all at the same time. See? She put me out. I told you she put me out. She's crazy, right? Everybody's crazy. Every woman that a narcissistic man has been with, right? All of a sudden she's crazy. And so also with option number 2, when I gave the DARVO example yesterday, the conversation is left with John being the victim. When you do the reverse victim and offender part of DARVO, well, you know, when I met you, I already told you I had a lot of female friends, Sheila. So I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know what's going on, Mary. I don't know what's going on, Mary. You know, when I met you, I told you I had a lot of friends. And you know, I also told you about some of my childhood trauma and abuse that I suffered as a kid. I told you that's why my addictions that I have that's going on, that's why that's going on now. So that's on you. That's on you. And your father wounds from when you abandoned at 2, that's what's running the show, Sheila. That's what's running the show, Mary. That's what's running the show, Barbara. Whatever your name may be, that's what's running the show. Yeah, you went and tried to trigger my addictions, leaving me having to deal with this stuff. Everybody after me, my family after me, you after me, people in my job after me, everybody's after me. So it started with you addressing him being inappropriate, getting women's telephone numbers, hugging them, being inappropriate physically with your friends, right? With 5 of your friends. And all of a sudden, the next thing you know, he's the victim. His childhood trauma is coming up, his addictions, and you knew it, and you knew he had a lot of female friends. So it's your fault because of what it is you're addressing, right? This is your fault all of a sudden. And in Genesis 42:36, it says, their father Jacob said to me, it's me that you make childish. Joseph is gone and Simeon is gone. Now you want to take Benjamin. Everything happens to me. As if he never did anything when he did what? Stole Esau's birthright over some stew. Then did identity theft again, right? When he teamed up with Rebecca, his mother, who had this whole manipulative, deceptive plot in order to get what? The blessing from him. So all of this kind of mess. But no, he didn't do any of that, right? He X'd out the reaping what you sow, right? Everybody's out to get him. Okay? So after this has happened, after John has said what I just said, in the reverse victim and offender role, you're now feeling guilty about what you said, about your role as a wife, about whether you ever even respected John to begin with, about whether you need to be in therapy for bringing it up in the first place. And then you apologize to John. You left with a ton of guilt only to have to deal with this situation when it presents itself all over again, and it will, right? And even if the conversation took place over the phone, you calling John back and apologizing to him for hurting him. Because he gaslit you into believing that it was your fault. So now you done picked up the phone. He was at work and you guys were going at it. You done picked up the phone and called him back at work to apologize to him. Apologize to him. And he was the one that offended you. He was the one that sinned against you by what? Getting 5 phone numbers from different friends of yours. But you're apologizing to John. You see how crazy DARVO is? It's a sick, manipulative, deceptive, gaslighting tactic, right? Like I said yesterday, it's gaslighting on steroids. And so what does John say? Well, what does John say to himself? I won. Right? I won in his head. But on the phone, when you call and apologize, see, I told you nothing really needed to happen. Nothing really happened between men and women, right? I told you really need to get some help. I told you need to go to therapy. Nothing happened between me and those women. Nothing happened. See what I'm saying? See what DARVO does to you? It damages the mind, the body, the soul, and the spirit. And remember, the soul is comprised of your mind, will, and emotions. Can you imagine dealing with that mess every day, all day long? It'll take you out of here. You got to be able to have some type of way of getting out of that web, right? Out of that entanglement, right? It's classic DARVO, the way he responded to you with that example I just gave you. So you're thinking, so what do I do? How do I help myself with DARVO? The easiest thing is exiting the relationship, right? The simplest thing, right? I won't say easy. The simplest thing is exiting the relationship, right? It's not going to be easy. It's a toxic manipulation, deception, gaslighting cocktail is what DARVO is. And our bodies were not created to deal with this kind of drama every day, all day. Our souls were not meant to to be able to deal with it. Our spirits were not meant to be broken on a daily basis and triggered all day long. Number 2, you got to create strong boundaries. Figure out what the common denominators is about what you discuss. and maybe even eliminating that from even the topics, right? Some topics they might have to just be left off the table. If every time you talk about something, that's what's going to happen with people who are like this, then it'd be better left off, right? Because you're going to understand, you're going to see the patterns behaving over time. Maybe in the future, this person gets help, maybe you can reintroduce the topics. But just like this individual had patterns of behavior to let you know this is DARVO, they also have patterns of behavior that's going to let you know if their track record is proving that they can handle it, right? Right? Because some people can't handle all of us, right? When we can't entrust them with everything, when they cannot manage the access we've given them really well. Some people can't handle all of you, right? Our bodies are the temples of God. And what we're going to do, open every entryway to the temple and infect our temple with venom from viper attacks. Right? Only we can decide what we're going to do with that. Number 3, deny physical access when we're reaching our emotional threshold. Okay? Remove yourself from that person's presence without becoming the poison container. Going for a walk, going for a ride, ending the call, leaving the room, protecting your soul at all costs. Right? What we want to do a lot of times, try to get another word in for what? Try to get another word in for what? So that they can then do what? Start attacking again? It's not even worth it. It's not even worth having the last word. Okay? They have a PhD in DARVO. People that use it have a PhD in it. Okay? You're not going to win. Number 4, you got to focus on the issue at hand. They keep talking about all this stuff. When they start attacking, no, we were talking about this. I'm asking you once again why you got the telephone numbers and we're inappropriate physically with my friends. And they might start with all kind of crazy 10 other things. And you keep taking it right back to the issue at hand, right? If it's something that has to be discussed. You might even have to gray rock and just make everything like, oh, okay. They tell you something. You don't give them any emotions to feed off of, right? Because remember, DARVO creates trauma bonds and seals the deal. Number 5, no defense. No defending yourself. No over-explaining, over-sharing, justifying, engaging with it, right? Ain't no sense in playing with it. Number 6, do not use vulnerable information do not give them vulnerable information because it's going to be used as a bait. And I hope between yesterday's message and today's message that something will be pressing upon your mind and heart and soul and spirit and saying, like, to yourself, some things have got to change. I can't keep going in this way, right? I cannot keep going in this manner and thinking I'm going to be able to perform my calling and do whatever it is else I need to do at this rate, right? Remember, you are enough. Reclaim your power, soul, and identity. And then I am challenging you to reclaim the power, soul, and identity of your calling. Grab your keys to the kingdom and get your inheritance. Again, I'm Katina Horton, the Love and Freedom Toxic Relationship Recovery Coach. Until next time, I love you. Be blessed.